All right, so we got Redux working nicely with our app. We've just learned an awesome library. I hope everybody's feeling good. Now, I do want to add a few things. Obviously, this is a simple example, but the fundamentals are there. Using these principles, you can go off and build larger and larger applications. But as I've been writing this, you may have noticed a few things. One, well, let's look over here at our folder structure. We can imagine as our app grows that it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is actually something I'm going to demonstrate to you later on in the course when we work on the Smart Pairing app, where we start loading our app.js with a ton of functions. And we're not using Redux for it. So this file gets longer and longer with new methods and new methods and new methods. Now, having one container component, that is having one connected component, a component that knows that the Redux store exists and listens to props and dispatch actions from it, well, having just one is not really realistic. Most likely, you're going to have multiple containers. But because of the way Redux works, that's fairly easy to do. We can just use connect and pick and choose which components we want to connect to the Redux store. And if we want two containers to speak to each other, well, very simple. We just connect them. And because the store is up above everything else, we're able to get that state information. So it makes communication very, very easy. So we obviously want to have containers like this and simple presentational components that are just pure functions that just receive props and render. However, as we grow more and more components and more containers, it starts to make sense to not have just one constants file, one actions file, and one reducers file. You can imagine these getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you'll see projects that have a actions folder, a constants folder, and a reducers folder. But I personally like the component way of doing things. That is, group everything according to the component. For example, create an app.js, or let's say there's a smart search field component. We're going to create a folder called search field, and that search field folder is going to have all the dumb presentational components that it needs. It's going to have all the actions that it needs in action.js. It's going to have all the reducer that it needs. And it's also going to have all the constant that it needs. So each folder is going to represent a component, a chunk of our website. And it's all coupled together in one little folder. So if we ever want to share code, it's going to be fairly easy to do. It's also really nice to think about it that way, instead of having these massive general folder names. And that's what you'll see with most big projects. This idea of components that have their own folders, these containers that again have their own folders as well as reducers and actions. And this way you can read through the folder structure and decide where you want to go to fix a bug or create a new feature. You also want to avoid repeating code as much. For example, in most applications, we're going to have a lot of fetch call. So wouldn't it be great if we had an API folder here that does the fetch call? Maybe we'll call it API, get API. And all we need to do is pass a function. And that function is going to pass that URL into the fetch function. And it's also going to do this JSON for us. So it's just going to return the data. So we stop repeating all this fetch.then, .catch. So thinking in terms of organizing your folders to something that makes sense, something that can scale. And if somebody comes onto the project, it makes it easy for them to follow and read is a good way of doing things. All right, that's enough for now. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.